Warning: this conversation contains some graphic language around war, violence, and sexual abuse. If you're listening around more sensitive ears, or you find that language difficult to hear, you may want to sit this one out.
Rachel, you know it is such a joy, an honor to have time to talk about story with you. You know, one of the greatest joys at the Allender Center is to be able to lead and support story engagement through our story workshop.
That's definitely true, Dan. And actually, our next story workshop is coming up October 14th through 17th. At the story workshop, Wendell Moss, Dan, and myself lead you through teaching to help explore your own story and the themes of your life in a supportive environment. We have a wonderful group of facilitators, many of whom you've been hearing from, who are trained to help you engage your story in a small group setting. And there can be incredibly profound healing and transformation in those 3 short days.
Oh, it's incredible. Really. And unfortunately, we often get folks who say, this must be for therapists, this must be for professionals, but actually it's for anyone looking to understand their story more deeply and to understand how it intersects with the story of the gospel. Look, no matter the harm that you've endured, there is always the hope for resurrection, but we've got to have the courage to enter into dark places if we want to know more about the reality of the light. So, look, we're inviting you to a renewed vitality in your own life and the ability to engage the stories of others.
And with all that we have been suffering in these past 18 months, and with the world changing so rapidly, it has never been a more important time for you to gain crucial understanding of your own life and the ways in which your story has shaped how you operate in the world. So you should definitely submit your application to participate in the story workshop today at theallendercenter.org/events.
Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachel Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
Well, Dan, we're back today with our final guest in our fun story series we've been doing.
Oh, and we could not end with a more remarkable story. And but may you introduce our guest.
Well, we're very privileged to be here today with Adam Young. And Adam is a therapist, a podcast host, among many other things that I will let him share more about. But he is also a core member of our team. And we're very privileged that he plays with us and has spent many years journeying with us in various forms at the Allender Center. So Adam, would love for our audience to hear a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun to be here. It's fun to be with both of you. I'm a dad to Hope and Eli. I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. I am a husband to Caroline, and Caroline and I have kind of journeyed with the Allender Center really since its inception. So there's a tremendous gift when you are married to somebody who is supportive of and understanding of what you're so passionate about. And thankfully, I'm in such a marriage. Therapist. I host a podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves, which really, in many ways, is the result of the narrative-focused trauma care certificate program that you guys do, because the 4th week of that program is focused on your kingdom. And it was during that 4th week many years ago that I began thinking about, what is my gifting? What is my kingdom? And at that time, I was basically a preacher without a pulpit. I'm a former pastor, and I had been dismissed, and so I didn't have a pulpit. And the podcast gave me one overnight. So super grateful for the 4th week of the Allender Center program, certificate program, and really launching the idea behind the podcast.
It's so crucial for us to have partners and to have a sense that we don't locate all that we do under our own banner, but it's imperative that I believe that not just our work, but other work includes a kind of intersection with other voices, other perspectives. And Adam, you and your work and your podcast has been one of those great allies and partners. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I interrupted you before.
What else am I supposed to? Oh, introducing myself. Yeah, I'm a therapist, like you said, Rachel. I love doing therapy. I work with traumatized individuals and couples. I do group work with you guys, and it's story based. I mean, I love reading and engaging stories of trauma, particularly with couples. Like, I'm in the middle right now of doing an intensive with a couple. And I mean, there are a few things more sacred and hopeful and holy than helping a couple understand their story and how their stories are playing out in their marriage. Yeah. It's so fun to play in those realms, and you all have equipped me to do that. So I couldn't do what I do without the training of the Allender Center.
Thank you. But before we jump much further, I've got to go back to a verb. Dismissed. That's an interesting verb, and it lingers there. Pastor without a pulpit having been dismissed. There's a story there, is there not?
Oh, there's a long story there. Indeed. Yeah.
And that, without whether going in or not, it says that you have known something of heartache in the context of ministry.
Yes, absolutely. Immense heartache. And Caroline as well, because the dilemma with being removed from a pastoral position is that it always inevitably involves your community as well. And so the loss of community was as painful as any part of it.
Well, we can say in an obvious sense, none of us would be engaging trauma as a primary work if we didn't know something of that heartache ourselves. So to jump us in, if there's one story, and what a stupid question, one story, but there are 100, there are 1,000, there are millions. But if there's one story that sort of that would give us a sense of who you are from your life, is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah, when I was 18 or 19, beginning college, and it was the first time I started really experiencing anxiety and depression really intensely. And I went to counseling for the first time. Her name was Anna. And after some individual sessions, she suggested that we have a family session. I have 2 brothers who are twins. They're 2 years younger than me, a mom and a dad. And she told me, Adam, I'm not afraid of your father. Your father doesn't scare me. And with that, I felt confident that, okay, not just confident, but incredibly hopeful that there was somebody who could contend with my father besides me. And she was, a professional. She's a professional. So we're going to have a family session. And I don't remember exactly what the purpose of it was, but I think it was something to do with, I'm going to express some of my anger at my dad. So we have the family session and we're all there. And I don't know how long we engaged before my dad started really breaking down and talking about his trauma with Vietnam. He's a Vietnam vet. He was in the Marine Corps, 67, 68, and he killed 29 people, some of them boys. And he bore this trauma, which I knew but didn't know. Of course, I knew as an 18 or 19-year-old that he had been in Vietnam. I knew about the people he had killed. I knew, but I also knew that his narrative was, I do not have PTSD like so many other Vietnam veterans. And so I really grew up grateful that my dad was one of the few that didn't suffer from PTSD. Of course, now I realize he had full-blown severe PTSD, but didn't know that at the time. Anyways, he began sharing for the first time ever with our family, and I wouldn't say sharing, but emoting, unloading, releasing unbearable trauma in this room about Vietnam. And about when he would turn the shower on in the morning, that's when the images would begin to flood him of the boys and the men that he killed. I noticed all of a sudden that the therapist had left the room.
Oh.
It was in her home. It was a side office in her home, and she had quietly slipped out. And it was just me holding this space. My brothers were weeping. I was weeping. I don't remember my mother at all. I know she was there, but I was focused on my father and his pain. And it ended. The session ended. We had driven 2 cars. So my dad had driven and my mom had driven. And as it happened, I got in the car with my dad, and I remember so vividly, I drove, he sat in the passenger seat, and I held his hand over the emergency brake, the way a boyfriend and girlfriend in high school hold hands, interlocking fingers so you maximize the surface area. And I held his hand like that. And I said to him as we're backing out, Dad, I love you so much. I will always love you. I will love you more than my future wife. And we drove home. And that's the story that came to mind. We can unpack together what it says about me in all of its complexity. But I think it says a lot about me and my family.
Again, to begin, thank you. It feels vastly inadequate to say those words, but thank you. It's a staggering, stunning, heartbreaking story on so many levels. If you don't mind me beginning in what may seem peripheral, where did the therapist go?
I imagine she went to her home, and here's how I made sense of it. I remember this part vividly. I remember thinking to myself, she's such a good therapist. She knows this is a private family moment that she needs to let us experience by ourselves. So I gave her an out immediately, not just an out, but she was, in my mind, elevated in her kind of therapeutic skill that she abandoned us and frankly abandoned me, her client, in that moment.
Yeah. Well, it's not hard to hear. You were your father's foundation presence, which implies as well that you would also be, in many ways, the one he worked out unaddressed rage and hurt and confusion. If you are his foundation, you're also the object of all that is not lovely about him. Is that a fair way of putting it?
It is.
So you've had to be the presence of containment, but also the one who brought intense attunement to his very being. And again, I make no judgment really about her other than it seems, well, I'm lying. Damn it. She abandoned, and it's bizarre, but she left you again in that role.
Right. Right. And remember, her words to me, which were, I don't mean this sexually, but they were seductive, were, "I am not afraid of your father, Adam."
Yeah.
That gave me immense comfort that someone could hold and engage this man.
Mm-hmm.
And
other than you.
Other than me. Yeah. And in the moment of intensity, she was afraid of his pain.
Mm-hmm. And crucial to underscore that you weren't.
That's right.
But you also knew, I'm thinking of this exchange in the car and this kind of vow and commitment. You also knew, though you weren't afraid, that you were very responsible for his life, that some sense of your capacity to love in extreme measures, like unconditionally, with devotion, could maybe somehow save him.
Right. And it wasn't that I wasn't afraid of his pain. I was terrified of his pain. I just wasn't, I had the courage to not run from it. And in many ways, it's only been in recent years that I've really come to realize this. The equation in my mind was, if you can heal him, Adam, he can father you.
Right.
Yes. Yes. And in that, you were his father.
Right.
And likely continued from that car and beyond, at least for some season, to be his father. A father as an orphan, waiting to have the father come. Again, it's not hard to put words, but I'd love for you to put words to how has this shaped your brokenness? How has it shaped your beauty? Yeah. How now?
Well, with regard to the brokenness, I mean, it's not a stretch to see the dilemma with getting married after a vow like that. I mean, I'll quote you, Dan, at Recovery Week. You said to me, "Adam, do you realize that you sacrificed your future wife on behalf of your mother to a violent father?" And yes, I realized that when you said it to me, and no, I still don't fully realize that. Now, no one needs to fear for my marriage. I have repented of said vow and shifted said loyalty to my beloved Caroline, but it had to be a conscious shift because I had pledged myself to this man. Mm-hmm. And, if that's not brokenness playing itself out, I don't know what is. It creates a wedge in a marriage that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you bring another character on the stage as you put words to that, and that is you married him on behalf of your mom.
Say more. I'm intrigued.
Well, you're the one who said it, dear friend. So I will return to you to say, how did that play out? That in your marrying him, you were doing something on behalf of your mother.
Right. Yeah. Part of the complexity of my story is that I was actually triangulated by both my mother and my father. And this happens. It happens. There are times when, and it was certainly true for me, where both my mother and my father looked to me to be their spouse in many ways. And my mother, I was going to say my mother was not capable of engaging my father's pain authentically. I don't know if that's true. She certainly was not willing to. But frankly, I think the truer sentence is that my father preferred my comfort to hers. Mm-hmm.
shall we say, that creates a certain amount of confusion on many levels.
Madness.
Yeah. So if I can knock on the door that's far harder to name, and we've said this in other podcasts, I'll just simply repeat it. Naming where our trauma actually has been the setting, been the soil of something really beautiful. It's never a means of trying to say, isn't it good we were traumatized, damn it.
Right.
No. However, something of the paradox of the redemptive process is that often the soil of despair and darkness becomes the very soil that incredible beauty shines. So all that to say, how have you seen something of this, double triangulation? I'm looking at my own life going, oh, thank God I didn't get triangulated by my father. My mother was enough. Thank you. So it's even more complicated. It's even more erotic, powerful, confusing, all that language. How now has beauty come?
Well, I think in a couple of ways. My courage grew as a result of interacting with this man and this woman. I don't claim to understand how courage develops, how desire relates to courage, but I desired to be fathered, and I desired to be fathered by him. Mm-hmm. And I still desire, he's dead now, he died last year, but I still desire fathering, but from him. Mm-hmm. And so I looked him in the eye when he would rage at me, full-blown PTSD rage. And the dilemma with that is there's both beauty in that and there's brokenness in that. There is a provoking of a man that I know is going to be violent towards me. But the courage has to be named. The other part where I see beauty is my mother and father taught me how to attune, really, really exquisitely attune to the subtle shifts in the affect and emotions of two very powerful people. And so, it's like you said, Dan, the paradox of the redemptive work of God. What do I do? What am I good at? What I'm good at is I'm really good at attuning to the subtle shifts in what's happening in the person's heart that's sitting across the room from me. And that is a gift. It's a power. It needs to be shepherded well, but it was developed because of my mother and father. It wasn't developed in grad school, and it wasn't developed, frankly, at the Allender Center. It was honed there, but the gifting was really, if you can use that word, from my family. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Again, the intersection of such brokenness and such beauty. Again, if I can just keep knocking on that door, how do you see the intersection of the two, just in relationship with your beloved wife?
The intersection of the brokenness and the beauty with Caroline. Well, that really, to answer that adequately, I would really need to put some words around the dynamics with my mother. Because my mother in this story that I've shared was conveniently and surprisingly silent. And that was a betrayal of our whole arrangement. Our whole arrangement between Mom and I was, Adam, you're there for me. I'm there for you. That was how I thought of it. And in my mind, my mother's kindness and tenderness was the gift that God gave me to compensate for my dad's violence. That's how I made sense of my growing up years. The dilemma with that is that every time I was in need like desperate need, like in this moment, my mother was somehow silent. Mm-hmm. This woman who was always present and kind and there was all of a sudden absent. And that realization, which has been, the past decade, has helped me see the dynamics between me and my mother much more clearly, and has helped me name the covert sexual abuse between my mother and I. And I would say that that has played out with Caroline, times without number. How? Well, I can be very attuned, but I am sick and tired of attuning to the woman, right? That's not fair for Caroline, because she actually deserves my attunement. Mm-hmm. But there is I marry this woman, and there's something in me that married her because she's not going to ask that of me ever. And that gets into her story. But the dilemma with that is she's a daughter of God who deserves and needs an attuned husband. So if that's at least the beginning of an answer.
Yeah. And I'll just say that I know your wife perhaps not as well as you, but I also know that she's a formidable presence and insightful and growingly courageous. So I'm with all that language that, like, I'll just say my marriage, moments of tumult that I have not chosen, but I have gained as a result of my wife's growing maturity to not only name my bullshit, but also my beauty. So that's sweet. That, shall we say again, that the bind of being the lover of both your mother and father has not kept you from being able to become further the lover that you wish to be and your wife wants you to be. So very glorious. If it can, again, just one more knock on this door. So the bind you live in is that you are massively attuned to trauma around you, which fundamentally means you live exhausted.
Yeah.
Curious how you live in the middle of that. I might be asking for myself.
Yes, that's true. It is hard for me to rest. And there's really two reasons for that. One is the hypervigilance about trauma. I feel it, I sense it, I see it. But also it's hard for me just to let my body rest and receive care because it was so sexualized by my mother. And so there's a sense in which it's hard for me just to be kind and to care for myself. It's hard to this is what I'm talk with my therapist a lot about the past year. When I'm working with clients, it can be a horrific story of sexual abuse. My heart's at rest. My affect is regulated. When they leave, when I'm done with that session and I have to be with Adam or be with God, I get dysregulated. It's hard for me to care for me and be at rest. It may sound like an odd sentence, but I'm at rest in trauma. And I am dysregulated when I am caring for my own heart and body.
Again, I can only come alongside and say, preach it, brother. I think that's true for many of us who are drawn and called. There's something that is enlivening as you engage, but also, to use a simple word, it's not just exhausting to deal with people's heartache. There is some element about But it is far more what we are called to have to deal with in our own body. That's actually what's more exhausting. Yeah. I'll have people say to me when they find out what I do, which I try to hide most of the time, but when the people say, I don't know how you can listen to all those stories. And the answer is, I don't say it to people, but it's like, no, that's fine. It's my story. That's still not a lot of ease in addressing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am so aware of my hunger for and need for care from others. I mean, frankly, what attracted me so much to the Allender Center and to the offerings that you give, it was partly your teaching, Dan, because you introduced categories that felt so true to me and yet were new. But it was more than anything, I received care from the leaders there in the context of my story that I had not received before. And my body yearned to return to that community so that I could receive that level of care.
Again, I'm just a delight to hear that, and may it be. Well, a slight shift, if you do not mind. Years ago, I was fly fishing with my dear friend John Eldridge, and as we sat on the bank of a beautiful river, he said, "Do you think about glory?" And I'm like, "No." Do you think about heaven? Sometimes. And then he said, what's the glory that you will one day be given? What's your reward? What will the rewards that will be true for Dan B. Allender? And it was like, shut up. I don't know. I don't think about that. And I had other words, but I'll just leave it at that. So I'd love to turn it to you. What is the glory that awaits you for how you have lived and what you offer?
Yeah, I think of that in two categories. The first is a word that I'm not fond of, which is the word persistence or perseverance. I don't want my story or an attribute even of my character to be, he is persistent. But it's true. I mean, grit will take you further in life than gifting in so many ways.
Oh, wow. And yeah.
I mean, frankly, if we're being honest, it's required grit for me to get connected to you people because I wasn't always, it took me 3 or 4 times applying to the externship to be accepted. And Rachel, you actually factor into this story. You don't know this, but there was one year that I forgot to apply. The deadline, I forgot. Yeah. And I emailed the powers that be, and said, I forgot. Can I still do it? And Rachel wrote back. Now, I didn't know Rachel. We had 0 interactions at this time. And it was 2 or 3 paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting next to Caroline when I got this email, and I read it, and it was so kind. Mm. And I turned to Caroline, and I said, this is why. I was infuriated because I was like, this is why I want to be a part of this group of people, because of the kindness of this response to me. She didn't let me apply, but she saw me, and it was kind, and it only increased the agony. But nevertheless, I had to persist. One of the most painful experiences of my life was, after you go through this narrative-focused trauma certificate program, there are follow-up things. And one of them is the externship. They didn't have an FTC2 at the time. And my wife was accepted into the externship, and I was not 1 year. Now, she's a PA, so like medicine is her thing. And I was a therapist, and story was my thing. And the viewers can't see your faces, the listeners can't see your faces, but you're getting the agony.
Yeah.
I mean, you have smiles, but I was in agony.
Oh, it just, I can feel it. Yep.
Yeah. So, but I persisted and persevered, and that's not just true. I mean, in many ways, my desire for my father to father me, to create, and I would try and create environments, moments, meals, and set him up to father me. And I persisted in that my whole life because I so longed for his fathering. And there was some sweet and good and holy reconciliation and fathering before he died. In 2009, especially, where we met every Friday at 4:00, and we talked about our story, my relationship with him. And he owned so much, which was astonishing to me because you have to remember, in my mind, he's the bad parent and my mom's the good parent.
Yeah.
The reality is my mother would never have owned anything, and my father, in fact, did. And he was able to own a lot of his violence towards me and his cruelty. And there was repair in the land of the living. And that is a gift that I just don't have words for. But I've lost I don't even remember your question. I'm off in the weeds here. Redirect me.
I would be honored to redirect because it's so obvious that it's something you don't want to actually think about.
But my glory. Right, my glory. Right. So persistence. Yes, persistence is a part of it. It's in Revelation somewhere. It's one of my favorite passages. We will be given a white stone. Those who overcome will be given a white stone, and on that stone there will be a name known only between you and the Lord. Now, I don't know if that's a word. I don't know what it is on that stone, but that's what I hear you asking, Dan, is what's on that stone.
Yeah.
And in my mind, part of what will be on that stone for me is the stories of the people that I have engaged in a way that has brought them freedom and release from bondage. I mean, the ways that there are times when I'm done with working with a client, or I'm done with an intensive or a group, and the work has been so redemptive and holy and free. It has borne so much fruit. And there's this simultaneous feeling of immense gratitude that you were the vehicle for something supernatural, and at the same time, incredible clarity that was me doing the work. I did that. No one else did that. I did it. Did God do it? Yes. Did I do it? Yes. I don't care anymore to tease apart the percentages. They're both true. And so you feel this sense of overwhelming gratitude and awe, and at the same time, immense satisfaction that I actually just did what I was put on earth to do. And that's what meaning is. That gives you meaning, beyond meaning. It gives you a sense of what Joseph Campbell called bliss. It gives you a sense of I am being Adam.
It's stunning. Thank you. We are nearing an end, but I sort of want to ask Rachel, do you think about the glory you're going to one day receive?
Sometimes, but I think like most traumatized people who work in trauma fields, I probably think about it more in terms of will I have worked hard enough to, will I have been faithful enough? And I think sometimes these kinds of questions play with my sense of, I think I like your word, Adam, my sense of meaning, because I 100% believe we are meant to labor with our gifts and our personhood and our stories, to steward them in a way that we'll hear well done, good and faithful servant. And I'm trying to lean into those parts of being, especially in a year like this, those parts of being human where it's and God dreamed us and created us to play in creation. Yes, to labor. Yes, to be a part of creating, co-creating. And so sometimes I like to think about what will be the ways I'm seen and known by God. What parts of my name will be there that are certainly showing up in how I bring my gifts to the world, but might also be like genuinely just for the delight of God, like may not have like a too tremendous of a purpose. And I think sometimes it's good for me to think about those things because they confront my own questions of like, am I loved by God beyond what I'm capable of doing for God or with God? Mm-hmm. And they help me in those places, Adam, that you're talking about that I can so relate to, where not only do I struggle with care for myself in the wake of offering extravagant care to others, but even question if I'm worthy of it, if I get to have it, or if I need to actually be okay with that deprivation. So I try to think about funny things like, what part of my name will actually be like, yeah, you're really sassy. And I kind of made you that way. And I deeply delight in that of you. Like, how will that be reflected? Or what will be the textures and the colors and the sensual experience of being in the new heaven and the new earth in the ways we're most meant to be? And so, yes, but I think it's also hard because it starts to, my probably more spiritually abusive structures kick in. And I think you can't even be thinking about this. How self-centered like that you would be thinking about this. So it kind of runs the gamut of all of that. Probably a longer answer than you were anticipating, Dan. But
no, I mean, I think you're reflecting, both of you are unquestionably more mature, spiritual, relational, I think, and really very concrete. Like I think part of my reward is at least a shack of some sort near a trout stream, and that I'll be able to cast a huge trout. I won't have a barbed end at the end. They will just take the fly. And after being caught, if indeed I have cast well and there's no drag on the drift, we'll chat. Not long, but
you're going to talk to the trout?
Yeah, the trout's going to talk to me and basically say things like, look, another foot or two would have given me a little better shot, but I did take it largely for you. So I mean, that's where I start going, oh, I am really anticipating eternity. Yeah, I want to be with Jesus, but I kind of want to be with Jesus on a trout stream. But I want to interact with trout. I kiss each one I catch, but as long as we have this breadth of, yes, I want a new name. I want my new name. But I also want a place by a trout stream. I'm not going to have that in this life. And so we'll come back to this perhaps at another time to ask again, what is the glory you will one day receive? But we'll leave it at that juncture to say, Adam, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us in and to underscore the rich glory of your podcasts invites people regularly to engage story with a sense of both heartbroken, but nonetheless deep awe and honor and eventually delight. And you have given us that privilege today. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a joy to be with you.
Adam, I do remember that period of time and you reaching out to see if there was still time to apply. And I remember feeling the agony of that because I knew we were where we were in the process and we weren't going to be able to open more spots, but I knew how disappointing and agonizing it is when we have our own fragmentation and miss an opportunity that we've been waiting for and I have been persistent in. And so I remember thinking, it takes a lot of courage to say no to someone when you want to say yes, and just trying to hold you in mind and to try to honor, to truly honor your desire and to honor that you even reached out to ask, because it could have been easy just to say, I missed it. I'll wait till next year. So,
right. Yeah. And that's what I felt when I read your response. I felt pastored. I felt shepherded in my desire, but also in my disappointment. I mean, and it was just so agonizing to be that well cared for.
Hi, this is Dan.
And this is Kathy Lorzell.
And Kathy, do you know that the two of us wrote a book that's coming out this fall? I'm assuming you do, but I want to just say, we wrote a book together.
We wrote a book. It's called Redeeming Heartache. And we really wrote it for anyone who's struggling with unaddressed pain from their past and who wants to understand why they're struggling with what they're struggling with in the present. And this book will help you understand how the story of your wounding is not a failure or something that can't be understood, but it's an invitation to your purpose and your divine calling. And it is available for pre-order right now. And if you pre-order it before its release date of September 14th, you get bonus content, Dan.
Does that include that you'll show up at people's homes and make them dinner?
I would love to do that. People should just let me know when they need dinner and I will show up. I'm an Italian grandma at heart.
No, the extra content is just us reflecting on some of the core themes of the book. And really, our task is to say that to name the truth about life is a risky walk on the wild side. But look, when adversity and suffering are significant, that wild walk of engaging the reality of trauma is really the only way we're going to see life itself.
So if you want to join us in our celebration of the book, we're actually doing a live conference based on the content of the book. And for those of you who have been longtime listeners, we're talking about orphan, widow, stranger, and redeeming those parts of ourselves into prophet, priest, and king and queen. It's going to be a great day, September 18th. So buy the book, come to the conference, and it's not just for folks who have read the book. Really, we're going to cover a lot of the content, and then it'll be a great way to move you into the book when it arrives on your doorsteps.
Look, I'm not usually the one to deal with details, but nonetheless, what date is this event happening, Kathy?
September 18th. September 18th. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, soon after that, Kathy and I and my wife Becky are packing up and heading out to Montana to do an intimate mystery conference. And we'll be doing that October 1st and 2nd in Bozeman, Montana, one of the finest places in the world to fly fish. But if you're unable to travel to Montana, we still have the option for you to attend the event from the comfort of your own home with a live stream ticket, but that live stream ticket will not enable you to do any fly fishing.
Or hang out with me, Dan, and the team. We are so excited to get back on the road. Even in the midst of this craziness, we are excited to see all of your faces. Intimate Mystery is a unique weekend that invites you into a place of newfound awareness and ability to engage conflict and desire in any type of relationship. So it's for partners, couples, people who are wanting to get into relationship, even people who are working through the edges of divorce. This is one of those spaces that will help you understand your own style of relating and how you do that within relationships.
Yeah, it's so important to underscore that this is an invitation to understand what intimacy calls forth, uniquely in marriage, but in all relationships, including a relationship with God. You can find more information about these events and more about our work at www, or like 3 W's and a dot, and then the Allender Center.org. Looking forward to being with you.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.